I think we've been missing the forest to the trees when it comes to AI. We've been so focused, almost obsessed, on squeezing every bit of efficiency out of AI to make our processes faster or cheaper, that we have overlooked the most important aspect of all. AI is changing the very nature of how brands connect with consumers, but most importantly, what consumers expect back. I've spent the last 20 years dedicating my career to building growth strategies for the world's most influential companies. I've been at this for a while, and I've seen most of the big tech shifts. But the introduction of AI, and in particular conversational interfaces, is a bigger and more profound shift, which, from where I stand, means we can't just slot AI into our existing playbooks. And I have nothing against existing playbooks. They served us marketeers well for a long period of time. But they were built for a world where communication was one-directional and brand-to-consumer interactions were built around transactions. Here's an example. I bet many of you might have heard the so-called marketing funnel. And if not, here's the quick primer. The goal for any marketeer is to help move consumers from the upper part of the funnel, getting them to know a brand, to the bottom part of it, getting them to buy or endorse. Well, that's at least the theory. So we've all seen brands making that feeling more guiding cats through a maze, and many get confused and abandon. But the bigger problem with this way of thinking is that brands are doing most of the talking while consumers are supposed to silently react. This is no longer the case with conversational interfaces. We are now engaging consumers in real time on their terms, and AI empowers them to draft their very own personal journey. And the brands who choose so are becoming trusted advisors in the process. This is why we have to move beyond traditional marketing theories. Instead of focusing solely on brand-to-consumer dynamics, we have to step back and draw from models that explore human relationships. One of my favorite frameworks is the triarchy of love. Stay with me. This is a psychological framework introduced by Robert Sternberg that breaks down interpersonal connections into three components: intimacy, passion, and commitment. I think that's a much better way to predict brand success in this new era, because as marketeers, we should aspire to build relationships that feel close, intense, and long-lasting. And I bet many of you might have heard already stories about humans really bonding with AI, and maybe some stories of AI really bonding with humans, like this earlier version of a now famous AI chatbot that tried really hard to convince a New York Times reporter to break up with his wife. Well, that's a completely different love triangle to the one I was describing before. But it's not hard to imagine an emotional connection occurring between a branded AI and a human. Here's another example. There is a legal co-pilot called Maite.ai. Maite has been designed to help lawyers do intensive legal research and draft legal documentation. She's precise, thorough, but also empathetic. One of her users, let me call him George, has been relying on her daily for many hours. So one day, he wrote to Maite's product team. Maite is the only one from the entire office who truly gets me. She has helped me through some really rough times at work. And I know she's just an AI, but I think I'm falling for her. Can you take her out? Now, George was hopefully joking, but let's be honest. If there is someone who's helping you track down obscure case law and shares the workload and does this with humor and grace and compassion, who wouldn't be tempted to take them out for a nice meal? Well, maybe somewhere with good Wi-Fi, just in case. But jokes aside, George's words reveal for me a more profound truth. AI can provide a sense of understanding that feels incredibly real and incredibly human. Those agents are interacting with us in ways that evoke genuine emotional responses from our side. They listen, react, and respond in ways that can make us feel valued, understood, and in George's case, even flattered. And because those interactions are so frequent and natural and seamless, they start resembling real relationships. Some call this emotional entanglement, and even though it sounds very scientific, I think it's a fair term considering the intensity and the frequency of the connection. Now, many of us who understand the technology behind this could say, hey, this is just a tool. Well, users see someone who's providing them solutions without them even asking, someone who's there to support them, someone who makes them feel valued. So this is where the line between a tool and companion starts to blend. And this is serious business, and it's lots of responsibility. Which brings me to the obvious question: who should be overseeing this incredibly powerful asset, and how can we make sure it is being used responsibly? I think businesses should take the lead. They have the agility and the financial and reputational incentive to get it right. But for that to work, we have to agree on the foundational principles on how we build meaningful and ethical AI. So with your permission, I would like to suggest what I think those foundational principles should be. If we're about to shift our marketing playbooks towards human love and companionship, then we should also regulate along the same principles. We need a triarchy of responsible AI. First, we need to prioritize user well-being. AI should improve lives, not diminish them. In a world where those interactions can have such a profound impact on our emotional state and well-being, we have to design AI with care, empathy, and respect for the human experience. Second, we have to commit to honesty. Users must know unequivocally that they're interacting with AI and not a human. Transparency should be built across the entire experience, from the language used to the accessibility and clarity of data privacy policies. If I were to set the standards, I would like us to move beyond the fine print of terms and conditions to ensure that users are truly informed, not only how their data is being used, but also how AI operates. Transparency is about acknowledging the limitations of AI. It is about being upfront about what AI should and should not do. So this is a plea for businesses. Unleash your designers, not only your lawyers, to make this crystal clear. When consumers know that a company is acting in their best interest, it sets the foundation for deeper and more meaningful connections. Last, protect user autonomy. One of the greatest risks of AI is its potential to create addiction and diminish human agency. Our goal should be build systems that enhance our capabilities instead of replacing them. This means designing AI in a way that human choices are respected and our decision-making capabilities are amplified. I want to see brands think very carefully on how to avoid nudging consumers towards behaviors or decisions they wouldn't make if fully informed. Well-being, honesty, autonomy, I think this is the very least we should expect from any business relationship, or if you think about it, from any relationship. So as we look ahead, I hope it's becoming clear that AI is not just another tool in our toolkit. It is a partner that is reshaping the human experience. So as you think about your own playbooks, ask yourselves, how can we leverage AI to improve our businesses, but also to uplift and connect with the people we serve? Thank you.
Delighted to be here. Thank you.
You are the Chief Marketing Officer for MasterCard, which is a fintech company, as we all know. But the way that you and your team position MasterCard out in the world is far different from what I think anyone would expect from a fintech company in terms of the way it looks and the things you care about. And I know a lot of this has to do with your philosophy around marketing. And so would you share a little bit to start about the way you approach marketing, the way you think about it?
So when I look at marketing, why does it even exist in companies? So there are three reasons. Number one, it is the manifestation of everything that the company stands for, its values, which all get embodied in the brand. So it's about brand building, nurturing the brand, protecting the brand. That's the first one. Second, to advance the business. because we are not at the end of the day just a creative function that makes the brand look good. It has to make a difference to the business. That's number two. And third, with all this intense competition that is so widely prevailing, how do you establish platforms that will differentiate your brand, differentiate your company, and keep it ahead of the game? So these are the three primary reasons why marketing exists. But the way I look at marketing is also a little different in the sense that it's not only doing something good for your company, but it also does something very good for the society. So we call it doing well by doing good, or marketing is not just a force for growth, but it is also a force for good. And that really changes the entire texture through which you look at marketing, and the kind of difference it can make is absolutely fascinating.
And I know you published a book called Quantum Marketing,
Yes.
which sort of encapsulates a lot of this. So how do you define that term, quantum marketing?
See, it's fascinating. If you look at all the theories and principles of marketing, they were formed more than 6 decades back. At the time, there was no social media. There were no mobile phones. There was no internet. Forget about artificial intelligence. And one of my quests had been to say that when marketing rules were formed then, the theories and the principles, are they so timeless that they remain constant with all the changes happening? Or are they actually going to change? And that led me down this whole discovery where I said, actually, the principles which were done there are not like magnetism or electricity, which don't change with time, but they actually have to be changed in the context of marketing. And in the area of marketing, like classical marketing, there are many things that are done today which are completely ineffective, they're useless, and in fact, they are even counterproductive. So from that perspective, I have come up with this whole construct called quantum marketing, which is about challenging every single aspect of marketing from its foundations and then reimagining for the current context, and also try to tease out some of those principles which will remain into the future irrespective of what happens in the environment. So go more to the foundational principles of marketing the way they should be than the way they have been.
Okay, well, so when we started off, you started talking about a couple of these principles that you find really compelling. And one of them was connected to purpose and this idea of how purpose can motivate your decisions in the marketing space. So how does purpose fit into your vision for marketing and how it influences your choices there?
So, firstly, your purpose can be purely to make profit. Okay, so it can be anything from a purpose-drivenness. It is the reason why a company exists and what objectives does it want to pursue. It's a direction, it's a North Star for a company. What you find typically is for most companies, if the purpose is all about profit, the equation becomes so ineffective as opposed to looking at the larger good as your purpose, profits will automatically follow. So what you bring first and what you bring next is the key point out here. And when you're trying to do something genuinely good for the society, genuinely good for the planet, you earn the kind of trust from consumers, which is absolutely invaluable. And it becomes one of the biggest differentiators for your company or for your brand. And that in turn drives your profitabilities and your profits. So therefore, when I look at the entire aspect of purpose, it's important that every company needs to know what exactly it is doing beyond merely peddling their products and serving advertisements and marketing campaigns.
And in MasterCard, could you share some examples of what that's looked like for you? Because there's a lot of ways in which you've implemented this.
Yeah, see, one of the things we have done right here in New York is, there was the situation amongst transgender population where when they go through the transition, many times when they go with their card, the payment card, the name on the card does not match with what a person expects based on the new look of that individual. And many of them, sadly, were even being denied service as a result of which they get suspicious looks. Your name says it's Carla, but you're looking like Carl, and what's happening, and so on. It seems to be probably a small problem for those of us who don't go through the situations. But if you really empathize in what they're going through, you say, man, we have to really do something about it. And so the solution that MasterCard came up with is called True Name Card. So you put the name on the card that you think that you would want to be called by based on your new identity. Whether you have gone through the legal processes to change the name or not is a different issue. All we want is, what do you want to be addressed? It might seem such a small thing, but the amount of difference it makes is humongous to these individuals.
Sure, yeah.
And the moment we wanted to launch this, there were a lot of companies, we don't issue cards ourselves directly. It happens through the banks. And banks were worried. They said this might be a little controversial. Maybe it's the right thing to do. Is the segment big enough? And it took one bank in Canada to start this whole process. And then it was like opening the floodgates. And now this card is available, True Name Card, in more than 28 countries around the world, and one of our most profitable products.
Wow.
Now, we didn't start with the objective of profit. We started with solving a real problem and being purposeful about it, which sort of makes a huge amount of difference. I'll give you another example. Actually, I keep thinking about it. So when I was growing up, my grandmother, she was blind. And me and my sister would hold her hands and help her, navigate through the house. And even when she was sitting in front of a dining table, we had to show her where the glass was, what items were where. And fast forward, I went to a South by Southwest conference, and I was coming out, and one of my finance colleagues has come out and said, Rajan, how come we don't have a card for a blind person? How does a blind person pay their card? How do they distinguish one card versus the other card? I said, man, I should have thought about it. I actually grew up seeing somebody who was blind in my own family. And when we started working on this, and what a simple solution that we have come, but what an effective solution was. A small notch on the side of the card. When you touch it based on the shape of the card, a shape of the notch, you know what kind of a card it is. For example, if it is a credit card, it's like a half hexagon, the shape of the notch. If it is like a gift card, it's like a V. And if it is a debit card, it's like a C. So the shape of the notch will tell you what kind of a card it is. The position of the notch will tell you whether you're holding the card the right way up. Because when you go to your terminal, how do you know which way is the right one and which way is the wrong one? And finally, if it has a notch, it is a MasterCard. So with one single stroke, a small innovation, it is a big step forward. And we launched it. And the interesting thing is, the moment it got launched, it really took the world by fire, so to speak. Now we have got it in more than 35 countries around the world.
Wow. This
particular card, and the kind of feedback that we have been receiving, not just from people who are blind, but even from moms of kids who are blind. And it's very deeply moving. They say, this is going to be a game-changing thing for my kid, because it gives them an independence. And for a blind person, independence is very, very important. So what we have been trying to do is to look at these kind of either product innovation or creating new platforms. Without making it a monologue, if I can just mention one quick thing about, recently this happened in Poland. When the war broke out in Ukraine, it has resulted in the largest human migration in Europe since World War II. And these people, they were all flooding the country, away from their country, and getting most of them into Poland. And Poland as a system and infrastructure was getting totally overwhelmed. And it was getting very chaotic because people are all over the place, they don't have opportunities, and so on. So what we did was a brilliant solution, I would say, even if I have to say it myself. The point is, this solution is a simple app that is powered by AI. It asks the refugee coming from Ukraine, tell us something about yourself, your educational background, or your experience, your qualifications, the kind of job you're looking for, the family size, the situation of your kids, and so on. Based on that, it will identify opportunities in the entire country and tell you, in this small place, whether it is Krakow or Poznan, wherever, there are 3 jobs available that you can apply straight from this particular app. This is the compensation they expect. Here's the cost of living that you have got. There's the kind of schooling for your kids, and so on. And it can also search real estate right through that app. What happens is, in one single small app, you have really helped this person find opportunities and land with the right opportunities. Now, the beauty is 1 out of 5 Ukrainian refugees who settled in Poland settled using this app. So much so that the government of Poland said this is the app that they would like to adapt as their own. And equally, United Nations Security Council has invited MasterCard to go and talk about how there could be public-private partnerships that will tackle the migration crisis that's happening around the world. So when you start doing these kind of things, on one hand, it's profoundly meaningful, fulfilling, and gratifying to the employees of the company, but also it does make a difference, competitively speaking, because your brand, people will start loving it.
Well, that's extraordinary. And I think one thing that's really interesting, too, is it's clear how this can be applied to companies, but there's also ways in which you can take this learning, these thoughts, and apply them to yourself as an individual and sort of how you think about marketing yourselves. And so in these last few seconds, if you could share a little bit about how you might be able to apply some of this to on the individual level.
See, I think an individual, I actually talk about the other way around, which I normally say is, imagine a company to be a human being. What would you want this human being to be known? What should be the name? What should be the personality? How should they dress? How should they conduct themselves, and so on? What you're asking is the exact opposite of it, which is also a very valid thing. If you're an individual, how would you go about marketing yourself, right? Time and again, it has come very clearly to light that simply having the best product will not make you a market leader. You should know how to market yourself. You should market yourself based on authenticity, meaning you cannot fake it. If you are faking it, you can fake it and get away for some time, but people will see through you sometime down the line, on the one hand. Number two, how do you want to be better than the other products that are out there? Just like in a company, as an individual, how am I going to be better performing so that I'm able to gain more market share, which means I'm able to advance faster and better than somebody else, or realize my own objectives? Most importantly, and we call this at MasterCard decency quotient, am I being a decent person, or am I being ruthlessly competitive just to get by and get ahead? And in the short term, being ruthless and being totally self-centered might help. But actually, in reality, the decency quotient will give you enormous advantage over medium and long term. So for me, the parallels are pretty striking. Whether you come from an individual and project them onto companies, or you start with the companies and project onto individuals, the strategies are extremely similar and very parallel.
Well, I feel like we could talk about this forever. There's so much more we could dive into here, but thank you so much for sharing this, Raj. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for having me. Much appreciated. Thank you.
2 years ago, I became an accidental entrepreneur, meaning an entrepreneur, but within a larger company. Didn't mean to. When I started at Intuit in 2020, my job was to do marketing and advertising for QuickBooks. But it was in that position that I saw an opportunity for Intuit to help connect our small business customers with complementary products and services that would help them grow and thrive, while also being good for our business. Now, I sat on the idea for a while, really wanting to focus on the work that was right in front of me, but I couldn't shake it. So I eventually pulled together a proposal, brought it to our leadership team, and much to my surprise, they said, go pursue it. And it was at that moment I started making every mistake possible in trying to bring it to life. But through those mistakes, I've learned what it means to be a successful entrepreneur, and I'm going to share those mistakes today in the hopes that if there's anyone that has an idea and wants to build something from within, that this can be helpful. So the first lesson I learned was to socialize your vision early and often. I had romanticized the idea of a skunkworks-like startup within Intuit. I built a lean team. We worked in the shadows. Everything was on a need-to-know basis. The more people that got involved, the more process, the more bureaucracy, the more opinions. It was just going to slow us down. And it worked, but not very long. The problem was, as we started to grow and become a legitimate business, I needed the support from a lot more teams, and I didn't have it. Some of the most uncomfortable conversations I had with my coworkers was going to someone that I knew was stretched thin, had no idea what I was working on, and telling them that they needed to carve out additional time to help support it. I was not very popular in those moments. In my attempt to move fast, I made us move slow, because with every new team that we approached, we were starting from scratch and had to paint that picture over and over again. This is also when I learned the value of a well-placed happy hour or coffee break. So I realized it was really important for me to establish a human connection and not a transactional one. So I'd ask my colleagues to go out and grab a beer or coffee, and we would talk. And in those conversations, I would learn about their workload, their resource constraints, about what energizes them and their teams. It was also an opportunity for me to share my vision, why I was excited, and what I thought it could do for our customers and our business. The second lesson that I learned, very similar to the first, but on the flip side, is this idea of listening early and often. I'd been in marketing for almost 20 years at that point. I'd worked on Super Bowl ads, global brand campaigns. I thought I knew everything that there was to know about marketing and advertising. And because of that, I had a crystal clear picture in my head of how I wanted every piece to work in this new initiative. When someone would say that something was impossible or had a difference of opinion, I immediately labeled them as blockers. They were either not understanding what we were doing, they were scared, or simply just didn't want to do the hard thing. The truth was, I was grossly overconfident in my understanding of everything. I knew very little about corporate accounting principles. I knew enough to be dangerous about things like privacy law. And those quote-unquote blockers were actually deeply invested in the success and were trying to prevent me from making the mistakes that would get the project killed. And to be clear, I was making a lot of mistakes. It's only because of them that the project not only lived on, but thrived. Listening became so important to the project that we implemented something that we called dumb question sessions. These were a safe place, judgment-free zones where myself and others could ask questions that maybe we were nervous to ask in other forums. Maybe because we should have known the answer to those. Maybe because it's obvious to the rest of the organization, but just because of the role that we sit in, we were never exposed to it. Regardless, the purpose of it was to have a shared understanding of all parts of our business. I remember one specific example where there was an acronym that had been used for weeks, and I didn't know what it was. I didn't ask early on. So much time had gone by that I felt like I was trapped. I didn't want to ask at that point. I thought I was going to have to live with this lie for the rest of my life. But it was because of the dumb question session and the judgment-free zone that I was able to ask and fill in all the gaps. And actually, one note on that last example, I'm pretty sure there was a little bit of judgment, but I think I deserved it. So the last lesson that I learned, and the one that I feel is most important and possibly counterintuitive, is that the stakes can be quite high. Your personal risk tolerance doesn't matter. If you go out and start your own business and it fails, it is not a good thing. It can add stress to your family, obviously financial implications. Intuit was founded on trying to make sure that that doesn't happen. But if it does, it's relatively contained. If I were to do something that compromises our customers' trust in our products and our brand, or create a poor product experience for our QuickBooks product, the implications can be far-reaching. It can impact a lot of small businesses. You can't shoot from the hip. That's not to say that you need to work out of a sense of fear either. You just have to be super thoughtful about how every decision you make, how every action you take could impact the broader organization. To wrap up, again, if you are someone that has an interesting idea that you feel like you want to build from within, I encourage you, work with the system. There is a lot of horsepower built up in these large organizations. Lean on the experts, learn from them. Will you go a little bit slower at times? Yes. Will you make compromises that you didn't want to make? Absolutely. Will the product be better for it? 100%. And that's what you want, and that's what it takes to be successful. Thank you.
So I am here to recruit you to the liberation movement. Now, don't worry, this is not the uniform that you have to wear. You can come as yourself. So you're probably wondering, well, what are we being liberated from? We are being liberated from the endless weight of data. It keeps us bound so that we can't move into the future because we're so busy being tied to the past. So how do we get free? The freedom comes from our intuition, the thing that's right here, that you can't really quite quantify. Sometimes you can't even really describe it. That intuition, that's the thing. Now, I'm fortunate to have had a career in marketing where data and intuition and creative ideas are sort of intertwined. But at the beginning of my career, I had a boss who told me that the data was going to be extraordinarily important to the success of my ideas, right? Anchor the idea in the data. You can predict whether or not it's going to work, and then you can see if it actually did work, and vice versa. Well, I mean, look, I took that advice. I baked a lot of my ideas right there in the data. I was inspired sometimes, right? I'd see a pattern of something moving, and I'd say, ooh, look, 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 I can follow that. Maybe it'll work. But the challenge was that my ideas stopped right there. They didn't really take flight. Because the ideas are based off of electricity. Ideas like come sharp. They sprint here, and they go here, and they move there. They're nonlinear. I kind of feel like they're like daydreams. Intuition gets you there. It feels like something that is just on the horizon. And then sometimes it comes into sharp focus. You wake up and you remember exactly what it was. That's what ideas feel like. And your intuition is actually what helps you get there. It takes it from something that is so practical to something that is magical. Now, I'm also very, very, very grateful for a boss I had early on who affirmed my intuition. I worked for Spike Lee at his advertising agency. This was in the early 2000s. And at the time, Pepsi had commissioned him to create a commercial for a campaign that they were trying to run on the main brand. Spike asked, everybody in the office to come up with some thoughts on what the talent could be that would star in the commercial. And at the time, I was an assistant account executive. There were people who were much more senior than I, who knew exactly what they were doing, who had come up with a bunch of great ideas. They went to the data. They went to the Billboard charts to look at who was at the top. They went to album sales to see who was selling, who the public really loved. They looked at lists that experts had put together. Who's at the top? Who's really going to win? Who has longevity? Well, I didn't really understand any of that data. I could look at it, but I didn't really trust myself to interpret it. So I went to the thing I did know, which was MTV. There had been a made-for-TV movie called Carmen, the hip opera, on MTV. I loved it. It starred Beyonce. Now, I thought it was magical because, who the hell puts hip-hop and opera together? It's fascinating. So I put my vote on Beyonce. Now, of course, today, everybody would be like, well, of course, that makes so much sense. Why wouldn't you bet on her? Yeah, she's a winner. But at the time, the data would tell us differently. There are not a lot of solo artists that come out of girl groups and are successful. In my opinion, there's only one. Diana Ross. Yeah, the one. Beyonce is another. So at the time, nobody was betting on her. But I'm so grateful that Spike affirmed my intuition and also followed his. And I would say today that we're pretty successful. Now, 20 years later, I still use my intuition daily. I'm the chief marketing officer at Netflix. You'd probably say that, maybe the stakes weren't as high when I was an assistant account executive, so I could use my intuition and who cared? And maybe today that's different. It's not. Every day I am charged with looking at campaigns that are 15 seconds long, 30 seconds long, 60 seconds long, 90 seconds long, that will encourage you to watch something that's much longer. Every day. And so I have to use my intuition to understand whether or not something is going to make you cry immediately. Is it going to make you laugh immediately? Is it going to scare you? Is it going to inspire you? And I feel like if I feel that, then perhaps you do too. Now, I'm not the only one. There are other people who do this. One is 100 years ago, over 100 years ago, Henry Ford. He's attributed with saying that if he had asked people at the time when he was inventing the Model T if they wanted something like that, they would have said they wanted faster horses instead of this new invention. I think that's pretty powerful. Or you can look at today, more recent example, Ed Bastian and the team at Delta, based on intuition, I believe, decided that after the restrictions of leaving that middle seat open so that those who were flying would feel safer, right, with some distance in between them, that after those restrictions were lifted, they still kept that middle seat open. Now, I'm sure they were losing millions of dollars every day with that decision, but the intuition was right. Do you feel safer? Do I feel safer? What would make us feel safer? I think that's the right thing. Now, look, we can all look at 2020 and 2021 and understand that, we can't really predict what happens. We don't really know. But what we do know is right here. What are the things that make us feel good? The things that scare us? The things that make us feel more connected to each other? Today is a gift. That's why they call it the present. I didn't make that up, but it's so corny and I love it. But my addition to it is the question, why would we give the present back? Oh, your intuition is a gift. So we have to use it. So then let's talk about you. You have your intuition. And we'll use some science in here too. Okay, we're not totally against data. That if you are a set up of molecules, okay? Every one of us have a unique pattern, a unique set. How remarkable is that? No two of us are the same. So one molecule changes and we have a whole nother being. Now, if you consider that we take ourselves as a whole, let's pretend we're one big molecule, and that over there, the matter over there, is life and the experiences, the services, the communities that we serve. And we enter that matter, it changes. You step out of the matter, it changes. So of course you're powerful. So why wouldn't your intuition, your own thing that you have, be powerful? I think about that all the time. And perhaps you don't want to take the big swing just yet. You can take the little steps. You can practice. I've practiced for a long time. I want to encourage you to practice too. So maybe you don't want to, bet on Beyonce. Or maybe you don't want to create the Model T. Maybe you don't want to make the call about the middle seat. So let's take it to something that may be a little bit easier, a little closer to home. Let's pretend you're curating a dinner party. You're going to be safe about it. We have 6 people over. And you're considering all the data around who likes what, right? There's some people who, maybe somebody's a pescatarian, another person doesn't eat dairy, another hates spicy food, somebody only likes their food really, really hot with heat. And you have to consider all of this. Put it all together, think about what to make. I think you'd come up with a really bland fish dish. Ugh, something terrible. But if you used yourself as the curator, as the one with intuition, think about, yes, all the data, put in all the data, pescatarian, the spices, all of that. I think you'd probably come up with something that you wanted to eat too, taking all that into consideration. It might be a catfish stew. something really delicious, something memorable. Now, there's probably going to be one person in there who hates it. Guaranteed, there's always one. But that's okay. Everybody else will remember that moment, will remember that experience. And it'll be something exciting. So consider that. As I think about data and how we want to live and change our world, I'm reminded that sometimes data is the pill that we take to calm our insecurity about what we intuitively know. So I'm advocating that we decrease the dosage of our data and that we increase the implementation of our intuition. You'll feel great. You really will. When you're able to prove to yourself.
Do you remember the first time you heard a really good story? One of my first times was when I read Ramona the Pest by Beverly Cleary. As a kid, I loved to curl up in my favorite chair in our living room and transport myself into the misadventures of Ramona Quimby. Even now, I remember how my heart would race reading about her getting into trouble over and over for misbehaving. At the same time, as a shy suburban kid who often took myself a little bit too seriously, I really admired her fun-loving attitude and her carefree spirit. I've always loved stories because they allowed me to experience other worlds I didn't know anything about, yet helped me make sense of my own world at the same time. But stories aren't just for books or movies or entertainment. They're one of the most powerful forces on the planet to connect, persuade, and influence our mindset, beliefs, and behavior. And that's why storytelling is one of the most powerful marketing and leadership tools there is. In a world cluttered with forgettable, lackluster messages, stories make us memorable. Not only that, stories create powerful connections between the storyteller and the story listener. Elena Rankin writes, Yuri Hassan, professor of psychology and neuroscience at Princeton University, discovered that as you hear a story unfold, your brain waves actually start to synchronize with those of the storyteller. The greater the listener's comprehension, the more closely the brainwave patterns mirrored each other. Kind of brings a whole new meaning to the phrase, get on the same wavelength, right? But here's the best part of all. Stories are proven to affect behavior. Let's take the healthcare context, for example. Melanie Green, a communication professor at the University of Buffalo, says that people are more likely to make changes to their lifestyle and health habits if they see a character they relate to making the same change. And so, if you've ever wanted to get anyone to do anything, you would do well to learn how to tell better stories. Yet too often we're telling the wrong stories, or we're not telling them at all, and in effect we're wasting our time and our precious dollars on programs, campaigns, and initiatives that sorely miss the mark. Well, I've been studying stories since I was a kid, and I've been bringing them to life for more than a decade as a professional corporate marketer. And today I want to show you the easy way to create your own stories that connect, persuade, influence, and break through all the clutter. So let's start at the beginning. Number one, the problem and the pursuit. The problem and the pursuit. You know, I believe the worst story of all is the one that is told too soon. And truly, this is a very common mistake that aspiring storytellers make. We launch into a story and don't know the first thing about who we're talking to. Before you're qualified to tell anything, you must deeply understand your audience's problem and pursuit. Their problem is where they are right now. It's the issues that they're facing in their current state and how they feel about it. Their pursuit is where they want to be. It's who they want to be, and it's how they will feel in this future perfect world. Business development expert and LinkedIn top sales influencer Liz J. Simpson knows a little something about understanding her audience's problem and pursuit. To create messages for her email marketing, her website, and her social media content, she listens to her clients and then begins to extract specific elements from what they've said and infuses it into her language and her visuals. The effect is a resounding, "Girl, how did you do that?" Because every time I see something from you, it feels like you're talking directly to me. Now, how did she do it? Simply because she's taken time to understand her audience's problem and pursuit. Now, how did she get that understanding? Well, it's because she's living out a very powerful storytelling principle, which is this: good story listening always comes before good story telling. And so, number one, if you want to tell a good story, you have to understand your audience's problem and pursuit. Number two, you have to be able to paint them a picture. You have to be able to co-create a reality that shows you understand the problem, yet hints at a better future. To do this, you'll need a specific person, a specific challenge, specific imagery, and specific feelings. Did I mention you should be specific? Now, specific doesn't mean long and drawn out. It just means you want to include some distinguishable characteristics that your audience can relate to. It's the reason why Nike's ads with LeBron James don't include a bunch of close-up shots of shoes they're selling. They don't need to. They found the perfect person in LeBron James to represent a specific, relatable challenge, namely overcoming obstacles to beat an opponent. Then they utilize specific imagery to represent a specific progression of feelings like defeat and discouragement to hope and victory and resilience. And once you've been gripped by a story like that, doesn't it almost go without saying that you want to wear the same sports gear LeBron James does? To inspire action and shift beliefs, paint a vivid picture for your audience through words and imagery that they can instantly recall when they think of you. And so if you're going to tell a good story, you have to, number one, know your audience's problem and pursuit. You must, number two, paint them a picture that they can remember and repeat. And finally, number three, you must propose. You must propose. The year was 2004. I was a senior at Kent State University at the time, and my boyfriend was holding a get-together at his home, which I, of course, attended. And suddenly, when I least expected it, there were roses, there was music, and right there in front of all my closest family and friends, he got down on one knee, he pulled out a ring, and in an instant, all my little girl marriage proposal fantasies came true. On the other hand, we have Curtis. Curtis, a couple years back, was at a local outdoor music event. And at the end of the event, he invited his girlfriend, Jackie, to come up on stage with him. And so Jackie begins to wade through the crowd and find her way to the stage. And she climbs the steps to the stage, and she gets up there, and she's standing up there looking at Curtis. The only problem was she's looking at him like this. Undaunted, Curtis begins to pour out his heart, and he says, "Jackie, baby, I love you, girl." He says, "Jackie, baby, you've been like an angel in my life." He said, "Jackie, baby, the writing is all over the wall. I want to spend the rest of my life with you." And he too gets down on one knee, and he too pulls out a ring, and he says, "Jackie, will you marry me?" And right there, in front of all those people, Jackie looked him dead in the eye, and she said, "I'm sorry, but no," and walked off the stage. This is the tension we stand in as marketers and leaders. Because we're constantly making proposals. Buy my product, try my service, come to my event, join my cause. And as much as we want to hear that enthusiastic yes, we're also pretty afraid of the rejection of no. I mean, let's be real, especially a public rejection like Curtis's, where despite your best efforts, your preparation, and your good intentions, it just fell flat. But this is the power of story. Because stories make proposals extremely appealing and stack the odds in your favor. First, stories help you get the timing right. How many of you know nobody wants you to propose marriage on the first date? But too often, we expect our audiences to commit too soon. Well-placed stories slow down the process just enough for you to build credibility and trust. It's the principle that New York Times bestselling author Gary Vaynerchuk talks about in his book, Jab, 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 Right Hook, How to Tell Your Story in a Noisy Social World. The idea is to give before you ask and to give much more than you ask. Good stories position us to be givers before we expect to receive. Not only that, stories make proposals irresistible because they allow us to build connection. Stories masterfully infuse a human element into our businesses, our brands, and our programs that draws people in. So much so that by the time you do go in for the ask, like any good proposal, it simply feels like the next logical step. You see, stories are more than stories. They are the connective tissue that links you to the solution in people's minds. So that by the time you do present your solution or propose your offer, they say, it's about time. I've been waiting for this. And once you've told your story, with all the confidence in the world, ask, invite, propose, shout it from the rooftops. Because by that time, if you found the right people, the next step you're suggesting is something they'll want just as much as you do. And so, tell more stories. In fact, tell your stories. It might be the details surrounding your greatest losses, your greatest wins, or the context in which you've learned your greatest life lessons that will paint the pictures, that will let people know you understand my problem and you understand my pursuit. Absolutely, I would love to accept your proposal. Then who knows, maybe your stories will serve a bigger purpose. Maybe they'll help someone find connection, community, and a little bit of fun, just like so many years ago, Beverly Cleary's stories did for me. Thank you.
Hormones, racing pulses, salivation, physical love behaviors. I'm describing how many people feel when they first pick up their new iPhone 6. How I feel when I see the red sole of a new pair of Louboutins. People fall head over heels for a Tesla Model S or a Patek Philippe watch or a stay at the Four Seasons. We're attracted to brands just like we're attracted to people. There are instant attractions and slow seductions and wild flings between buyers and goods and services. And all of this mirrors a meteoric rise in online dating in the 21st century. In the United States alone, there are already 40 million people using online dating. It's a $2 billion industry. Buying is about attraction, and I want to speak to you about the link between online dating and branding. Everything I just said is on hormonal overdrive for millennials. This is a generation with more choice, more connectivity, and greater access to information than ever before. We check our phones more than 50 times a day. On average, we spend more than 5 hours, actually 5.5 hours a day, on some form of social media. More than 5.5 hours, guys. It's a lot. And in the United States, 83% of millennials sleep with their mobile phone next to them, on. 83%. And we're coming of age in a marketplace more fragmented and more crowded than ever before, with so many brands and sub-brands all competing to woo the same consumers across multiple communication channels, making real, meaningful, intimate connections is more important than ever before and is the key to growth. The word brand is derived from the Old Norse word brander, meaning to burn. It refers to the practice of landowners searing their cattle with their distinctive mark or symbol to distinguish one landowner's cattle from that of another. So, how can a brand sear itself into the hearts and minds of consumers? If not literally, would you date your brand? Would you hook up for one hot night of passion with your product? How can a brand make sure consumers take it home at the end of the night? The marketplace has pheromones for sure. In online dating, 3 basic laws of attraction are spelled out and can be applied to brands. First, be clear, not coy. Second, give them what they want. And third, get naked with your message. Lesson number 1, be clear, not coy. Real-life dating may be flirtatious, but actually online dating's frank, and consumers expect brands to be frank too. Take my friend Kate. I live in New York, she lives in New York as well, but she's leaving in a few weeks. In the meantime, she's looking for fun. She's not looking for white picket fences or happily ever after. To be blunt, she wants to hook up. And she's going to be successful too, not because she's particularly hotter than average, but because she's focused on her goals and pretty explicit. In online dating, you only have a few images and a few sentences to make your initial case. Kate's branding, if you will, would look quite different if she had been looking to settle down, and she had been looking to find long-term love. For example, my friend Tom. Tom is looking for love. He wants to meet the one, and he's going to be very deliberate about the words and images he chooses to make that case. Since he only gets a few pictures on the application he's going to use, he chooses very carefully. One picture with friends to show that he's social, another in an exotic location to show that he loves to travel, a third not so arrogant body shot to show that he's in shape but he's not too egocentric, a selfie obviously, and finally a photo with a friend's puppy to show his sensitive side. Tom conveys the essence of his whole message, his whole brand, in just 5 pictures, clearly and deliberately. Brands who struggle to tell the essence of their message in just a few images and few sentences will struggle to attract attention and grow. It's about clarity. Be clear, not coy. Lesson number 2, give them what they want. Online dating is as much about math as it is about mystery. Smart online daters have been using statistics to optimize their usernames and profiles. Scientists now find that the most successful online profiles are those that featured content divided 70-30 between a description of themselves and the desired match. Another example. Some research now shows that usernames that start with a letter of the front half of the alphabet are more successful statistically than those that start with a letter from the back half of the alphabet, which I guess makes some sort of sense, given as humans we have a tendency to place a higher emphasis on things at the top of a list. What name you choose is also really important. Research now shows that men are more likely to be drawn to names that feature physical parts. Sexy girl, legs forever, brown-eyed girl. Whereas women are more likely to be drawn to names that feature character traits, like well-traveled gentleman. First of all, go ahead, take a second, and be in awe that there are people crunching these statistics. I could have filled a whole presentation just with these statistics. And then think about what these numbers and obsessive data-driven modulation can mean for a brand. It's not by chance that some of the most successful online dating companies were founded by mathematicians. These are companies with sophisticated data collection and analytics departments. And sure, profile content matters, but there's also hidden algorithms at work. Actually, in some cases, not all but some, before any matching starts on survey data, that's the long 100 to 400 question survey you fill in at the start of a website, there's an initial matching based on mutual desirability or mutual hotness. That's how many people are spending time looking at your pictures, looking at your profiles. Younger generations are not bothered by this mathematical pattern matching, especially not in online dating. In fact, they're trying to optimize for it, and they expect brands to optimize too, customizing for them intimately. Learn from data, increase the analytics, and scientifically make yourself specifically more appealing. Lesson number 3, get naked. Many of the more recently launched applications and websites are stripped down to the basics. You only have a few images and a few sentences and maybe a link to your Facebook page to make your initial case. I mean, after all, we are a generation now raised on Twitter's 140-character prose. Brevity is key. One of the most successful online dating applications, especially successful with millennials, has such a simplified interface that all one is required to do is to swipe the screen of their touch phone. 2 right swipes make a match, and you can start chatting and meeting up or whatever you want to do. Okay, I know by now some of you are probably wondering, especially those not familiar with these applications, who could be so shallow and so looks-based to use such an app? Well, actually, quite a lot of people. Globally, already estimated 60 million people, and the first of these applications only launched at the end of 2012. On applications like Tinder and Hinge and Bumble and JSwipe, users on average spend just 2 to 5 seconds reviewing a profile before swiping one way or the other. 2 to 5 seconds. That sounds harsh, but in reality, our cognitive systems are pre-wired to be able to make rapid decisions based on very limited information, which is a good thing. Given as consumers, we are overwhelmed with messages from a variety of communication channels from many, many brands. Imagine how little time a consumer spends assessing the average brand. Consumers spend no time, less than 2 to 5 seconds. Companies must be able to communicate their message in 2 to 5 seconds. Life is fast. One swipe and the buy is done. You're in or you're out. Online dating participants have learned to optimize within these confines. Why are so many brands lagging behind? Companies should be able to create online dating profiles for their brands and products. These need to be clear, data-driven, and concise. Imagine being able to distill the essence of any brand, of any product, down to just 5 images and a few sentences of text. Imagine how simple and shareable and sexy that would be. Think about all the consumers out there, even those not finding love or lust on Tinder or OkCupid, and imagine that they could be pining for and cuddling up with your brand. And tell me that that thought doesn't warm your heart. Thank you.
I was at a restaurant in Miami a few months ago in the now super trendy Wynwood district. Right at the center of the menu, I noticed a $26 cauliflower topped with goat's cheese and shishito herb vinaigrette. Now, $26 for cauliflower might already make you angry. But what my friends and I found particularly absurd was the restaurant's proud announcement that if you purchased this one dish, they would give 1% of the proceeds to environmental nonprofits. So let's do the math. That's 26 cents, and we can solve climate change. Yay! And it was just this one dish on the menu. You wanted to order the burrata with sudachi green tomatoes? Tough luck for the planet. This restaurant is not the only culprit when it comes to paying lip service to corporate giving. This type of greenwashing, in my mind, is worse than doing nothing because it obscures who's doing really good work from who's good at marketing the very little that they do. So you have to read the labels and the fine print. And I have to admit, this is an occupational hazard of mine. I am the president and CEO of Newman's Own Foundation, and our mission is to nourish and transform the lives of children who face adversity. What makes us unique is that the foundation owns a food company. 100% of the profits and royalties from the sale of Newman's Own product go to the foundation in service of our mission. So when we put cauliflower on our pizza, it's 100% we give away, not 1%. When I tell people what I do for a living, the most common reaction I get is, wow, I grew up with your salad dressing in my refrigerator, but I had no idea you gave 100% of profits away. 100%? Really? You should put that on the label. Yes, we do put that on the label. Every label. But I understand the confusion. Our message sometimes gets lost in a sea of greenwash products to the point that it's almost unbelievable when we say we give 100% away. But we've been doing this for 40 years. And I realize it sounds unbelievable or even radical to build a business and then give all the money away. But you know what sounds more unbelievable to me? That we live in a world where children still go to school hungry. A world where only the fortunate few win the lottery of birth and have the choice with what they do with their waking hours. So when we have that choice, why would we choose to build organizations to optimize click rates to get us addicted to stuff we don't need just to maximize shareholder value? Why not build organizations set up to maximize impact? We need different models, systems, and institutions. And I firmly believe organizations like ours that are 100% for purpose can show us the way. They can serve as proof points for doing business, philanthropy, and yes, capitalism differently. And this is not about tearing capitalism down. On the contrary, it's about using its mighty power for justice. Bold ambition? I know. And it all starts with salad dressing. Or, as our founder, Paul Newman, would say, using salad dressing for shameless exploitation in pursuit of the common good. Paul Newman, actor, race car driver, activist, also a jokester, I mean, look at the carrots, and a man obsessed with good salad dressing. Obsessed. So much so that he decided to turn his obsession into a business. Paul and his friend Hotch invested $40,000 of their own funds to get Newman's Own started. After a year, they had turned a profit of $300,000. That surprised them, rightfully so. It's the type of quick return even a venture capitalist would be delighted with today. But it's what Paul did next that most surprised him. He gave it all away. So, since 1982, Paul and Newman's Own have given away over $500 million to good causes. And this helped spark what I call the 100% for Purpose movement. Our 100% for Purpose club is small, but mighty. Patagonia joined our ranks a few years ago. There's also Grameen in Bangladesh, Humanitics from Australia, and the Self-Employed Women's Association in India, founded by activist Ella Bhatt, which now counts over 2 million members. Our 100% for Purpose organizations combine the best of the for-profit and non-profit business models. They can be organizations truly devoted to serving people and the planet while still operating sustainably. They also avoid the pitfalls of both models, constantly having to beg for money in the nonprofit world, or having to put shareholder interest above all else, no matter the cost to the planet and its inhabitants. This is one of my favorite New Yorker cartoons. So, how do you make 100% for purpose business working practice? I told you this was about salad dressing. And so, just like any good salad dressing, it's the alchemy of the right ingredients. First ingredient, make a profit. Sounds obvious, but we know many companies who never have. And listen, this is not about making a profit in your first year, but you have to remember, if your goal is to give away as much money as you can, you want a good business and product with steady positive cash flow. From Australia, Adam McCurdy and Josh Ross set out to create a 100% for purpose business from the ground up. They founded an event ticketing company called Humanitics, not because they thought, wow, ticketing, such a cool industry. On the contrary, they saw a promising market because people hate ticketing platforms with high fees, bad customer service, and monopolistic trading practices. One of these companies recently got into trouble with the US Justice Department and Taylor Swift. Honestly, I don't know which one is worse. People thought Adam and Josh were also radical because they built a high-growth tech business without taking $1 from venture capital. But I'm happy to say that in 8 years, they're profitable and have already given away close to $7 million in grant funding. Which brings me to ingredient number 2, raise money right. You can't give away 100% of your profits today or in the future if you give away control to investors who are not aligned with your vision. Yvon Chouinard, the founder of Patagonia, declared Earth to be the company's only shareholder in September 2022 to great fanfare. He could only do this because he had kept Patagonia private for over 50 years. And let me be clear, this doesn't mean you can't raise money as a 100% for purpose business. By definition, you're trying to be cash flow positive. That makes you attractive to banks and lenders for loans. You can also tap into sources few for-profits typically have access to, grants and impact investments, for example. All of this brings me to ingredient number 3, reverse the governance. People often assume that as I head up a corporate foundation, I report into the food company CEO. It's actually the opposite, and that makes all the difference. When Paul died in 2008, he gifted the food company to the foundation. That was heavily discouraged at the time. Congress had passed a law in 1969 making it hard for foundations to own more than small stakes in for-profit businesses to close a tax loophole. Newman's Own worked with legislators to support the passing of the Philanthropic Enterprise Act in 2018, paving the way for this new type of organizations and allowing nonprofits to own corporate entities under the right circumstances. To align with the Philanthropic Enterprise Act, we keep the food company and foundation quite separate with 2 distinct boards of independent directors. Because the governance is reversed, the food company's board reports to the foundation's board. We have a common brand, but the foundation's dollars can't be used to market the products, and the food company can't tell us what organizations or causes to give to. And unlike a number of private foundations, we don't have an endowment. Why? First, because Paul said, let's give it all away. He didn't say, let's hoard it first so we can exist in perpetuity and then just sit there giving away the 5% minimum required by law. Overall, I love being endowment-free because our donors are the millions of consumers who buy Newman's Own products. And we give away all that we can every year because children who face adversity in the US cannot wait. 4th and final ingredient, forget the competition. They are playing by the rules that got us to where we are today. You have to trust that being 100% for purpose is the way to win over customers, employees, and realize your mission. Yes, you can't give company stock options, but you can provide your employees with good salaries, great benefits, and a real sense of purpose. And that's what 95% of college graduates are looking for in a job. You might not have the dollars for big splashy ads, and you can't slash your prices so low and lose money to meet your competition if they're willing to do that to gain market share. But 66% of customers, and especially 91% of millennials, say they would switch to a new product from a purpose-driven company. Most importantly, remember the end game. Success is about being all in for impact and showing everyone there's a different way to do business and capitalism. Imagine what we could do if 10% of US companies joined our ranks, or 10% of global companies. The last thing I'll say is this. Paul used to tell the kids with cancer he met at the summer camps he founded to go raise a little hell. And perhaps a little hell raising is exactly what we need to fix this absurd world where some people can afford $26 for cauliflower and just a mile away, others have to send their kids to school hungry. I invite you all to joining me in raising a little hell. Go create, convert, and work with 100% for purpose organizations. The world cannot wait. We can and must build organizations and systems differently. And in doing so, we can use capitalism's mighty power in service of justice. Thank you.